Welcome to Marketing Brew Weekly, where we dissect the trends and strategies that are surprising and delighting the marketing industry. I'm Jenny Mywin, reporter at Marketing Brew.
I'm Kelsey Sutton, editor.
And I'm Katie Hicks, senior reporter.
Today, we are digging into the K-shaped economy. It's the economic term on everyone's mind. So how should marketers be thinking about it? Okay, so what exactly is the K-shaped economy? I do have a handy little definition from the AP here, but to put it frankly, it is basically that the wealth gap is increasing, right? The upper part of the K refers to higher income Americans seeing their incomes and their wealth rise and their ability to spend continuing to go up, whereas the bottom part points to lower income households that are struggling with their various spending, weaker income gains, steep prices. Another name for it is the two-tier economy. So it's a stressful time to not be rich, which feels like
Isn't
that should
always
be
the
always, but especially now. And this is something that marketers obviously have to be thinking about and how they appeal to their customers, whether you are a luxury brand, whether you're a truly affordable brand, and especially if you're somewhere in the middle, how do you position yourself so that you are something that people want to spend on, people can justify spending on, depending on what part of the K you're on. So I can't wait to dig into it. Really, why should a marketer care about the K-shaped economy, and how are they going to appeal to both ends and that middle part?
Or even, do they pick a part? Do they pick the top part or the bottom part for those brands that maybe are appealing to both?
Seeing the death of the middle class and the death of the middle brand.
Yeah.
Spicy.
Before we get into it, though, I want to ask you guys, if you could automate one thing out of your life, what would it be?
I'm going to go with flossing my teeth.
Oh my gosh. Can you imagine if it's like going to the dentist? You're like, just do it for me.
Perfect. Yes, that's exactly what I want.
But for marketers, an even better answer might be automating that busy work away with Active Campaign. Their autonomous marketing platform helps cut out all the tedious parts for you, like building your email and SMS campaigns, optimizing them based on billions of data points, and summing up the results with clear next steps, not endless reports.
That way, you can spend more time on strategy and less time on marketing admin. ActiveCampaign's specialized AI agents can extend your team and handle the operational work. So you get your message out there in minutes, not weeks.
Plus, you can align your message across every channel instead of losing things through the endless game of office telephone. Take all that work off your back when you go to activecampaign.com. That's activecampaign.com.
Okay, I want to map out a little bit where brands sort of live in this K-shaped economy that we are all living through. So we literally should just imagine a big uppercase K, which I can do easily. So who's reaching the top of the K? I think the obvious answer is sort of the luxury brands, fashion houses, luxury car brands. But then I also think that sort of aspirational brands maybe are living, maybe not at the very top of that K, but close.
They're striving for it.
Yeah.
Sure.
So I mean, are there any aspirational brands that you guys think of that might kind of live on that K?
Delta in like the airline space is really trying to position themselves as like the luxury airline, or at least like the high quality, better experience than perhaps your Frontiers, your lower budget airlines. And I feel like they're going through a brand refresh right now where they're positioning themselves as like a lifestyle airline. So really trying to reach that like upper crust of travelers.
I feel like a lifestyle brand is kind of inherently maybe for an upper middle class or upper class consumer, because buying a brand to sort of be part of an aspirational lifestyle perhaps. And maybe that's also aspirational brands or wealth associated status symbol brands that kind of signal that you are doing well for yourself. I think of Erewhon.
Yes.
Katie, you recently wrote about their smoothie collabs, but maybe even American Express, because they have maybe more everyday consumers. But I think it's sort of a wealth. It's a status symbol for sure. If you slap down your black card, which is, I think, a $10,000 one-time fee and then a $5,000 annual fee.
I wouldn't know, unfortunately. That is not in my tax bracket. But I feel like all of those brands that we just mentioned, like it's you get to say that like I have an Amex card, I get my smoothies at Erewhon, I fly Delta One. It's like it has that little hint of status to it, that little bit of like signaling that like you are a little bit more elite, and that is what the brands like want to appeal to. to is like that consumers need to express that about themselves by aligning themselves with the things that they use and the things that they like are visibly being a part of. And Erewhon is such a good example because the smoothie alone just like who has the money to spend $18 on a smoothie consistently? And then if you're actually spending money at Erewhon on other things, I've seen a couple of videos breaking down like the price of mayonnaise, and I'm like, seriously? Is that real?
Well, just wait till you read more into the smoothie thing. Like, they have memberships. If you want to be a member at an elite grocery store, Erewhon's your place.
Right. And so these brands like Erewhon, like they're good. Like, you don't have to change your marketing strategy that much. If your consumer base is still spending, great. They're going to still spend with you. You know, you want to keep reaching them. But I think there's a lot of other brands that maybe are facing the K-shaped economy with a little bit more apprehension.
A little stress.
Yeah. So let's talk about the bottom of the K. So what kind of brand? I think of kind of affordability. You know, brands that market themselves as very affordable and target that middle and lower income consumer pretty consistently.
I mean, I think we're seeing this with like dollar stores are doing really well right now. Like, I have the numbers here, like Five Below had net sales in this last quarter increased by 23% to over $1 billion. Five Below, that was Five Below, but Dollar Tree had one of its strongest quarters in years with 9.4% sales growth to nearly $5 billion. So these budget stores are really doing well. I think that shows how stratified the economy's getting, is like these really cheap places are only getting more and more popular.
That's the numbers perspective. And then I feel like just from like a social media perspective and just like living in the world perspective, I definitely see people like talking about these places more. It's like I get a lot of DIY content and like artsy craftsy stuff, but people will be like, oh, like go to Dollar Tree to get your supplies. Like, it's so cheap. Like, you can do this. An account that like is really popular that I'll see often is there's a mom who makes like Dollar Tree meals, and her whole thing is about like making accessible meals using cheap ingredients and how you can get everything at Dollar Tree, and people are really attracted to that. Obviously, people who have like a need for that, but I feel like just from reading comments and like seeing how people are engaging with it, people who might not be like directly in need of that service are also like really appreciative of it and like really like valuing it. So I think like just seeing that like these types of lifestyles on the opposite side of like a Delta lifestyle is also really appealing to people. Kind of shows that there's like that dichotomy. I mean,
Coke here, like they recently said that they're seeing higher demand at both dollar stores and at higher end outlets that skew towards wealthier consumers, like fast casual restaurants and amusement parks. So like just noting that, like the brands are seeing it themselves, that like the dollar stores are popular, but so are the high-end places.
Right. I feel like for the lower income consumers, like it's a classic case of trading down. So looking, where can I cut costs further? And I think there are some brands that have really positioned themselves as really kind of owning that. Dollar Tree, it's in the name, right? Like they, Five Below, it's in the name, right? I think that one of the things that's interesting though is that, and we might see more of this, is some of those brands really looking to kind of amplify that messaging of trading down, or we are extra affordable for you. McDonald's recently rolled out some more extra value meals, and the CEO appeared on CNBC, I think in early September, and talked a little bit about kind of why, sort of the economic reasons for why they were doing that. And let's take a quick listen at that interview.
Particularly with middle and lower income consumers, they're feeling under a lot of pressure right now. I think there's a lot of commentary about what's the state of the economy, how's it doing, and what we see is it's really kind of a two-tier economy. If you're upper income, earning over $100,000, things are good. Stock markets are near all-time highs. You're feeling, quite confident about things. You're seeing international travel. All those barometers of upper income consumers are doing quite well. What we see with middle and lower income consumers is actually a different story. It's that consumers under a lot of pressure. In our industry, traffic for lower income consumers is down double digits. And it's because people are either choosing to skip a meal. So we're seeing breakfast. People are actually skipping breakfast, or they're choosing to just eat at home. And so for our business, which has a significant group of consumers which are in that middle and lower income, we needed to step in with something like what we're doing here.
I think this is such an interesting kind of strategy from them, from a pricing POV, but that pricing allows them to then market themselves very aggressively to these middle and lower income consumers by saying, here we go. Here is exactly our value proposition to you. We understand you're maybe struggling. Maybe that's not directly said in the messaging, but acknowledging that in some way so that they can kind of own more of that spend, even if that spend is dwindling among that consumer set.
It's interesting that like McDonald's kind of feels the need to emphasize like a value menu, a dollar menu, because I feel like until maybe this more recent emphasis, McDonald's hasn't really been synonymous with being like super cheap and like the dollar value menu. Like that's not what people like necessarily think of when they think of McDonald's marketing. I feel like it's been a lot about like their partnerships and like their social presence. And it's not an elevated brand. It's still a fast food brand at the end of the day, but they weren't emphasizing that affordability so much. And I think the fact that they are now does speak to this economic trend.
I mean, there's a whole Chili's campaign earlier this year where they were talking about how their burger meal is cheaper than McDonald's. And like that was their whole messaging was like, look, we're cheaper than fast food and you can actually sit down here. But just thinking about Chili's, like I feel like there's this whole group of like middle class geared brands, like places that are like fully made for the middle class experience, not necessarily a dollar store, a little bit more elevated, not a luxury store. What do you guys think of with these middle class brands? Like what comes to mind when you think of a brand that kind of sits squarely in the middle?
Yeah, I mean, I think of brands kind of like Target maybe is a good example. I think there are some like, I would say budget hotel brands. And the reason I say that is just, I mean, because if you're like travel is
an expense,
yeah. Right? And it is often, it's not cheap. And it's also not really something that people, if you are really, really strapped for cash, like maybe you're just not going on a trip at all. But there's somebody who's cost conscious, but they still want to go on a trip. They still want to take their family somewhere, but they're looking for something that's a little bit more affordable. And it's such a good point, Katie, to like these sort of chains around the country that, again, sort of emphasize reliability, affordability. We have a nice meal for you that's waiting for you. It's a nice experience, but it's, it doesn't break the bank.
Chili's reminds me of a couple of other like fast casual chains, Chipotle being a big one. I feel like Chipotle in high school was like so exciting because it was fancier than a McDonald's, it was fancier than a Wendy's or something, but it was at one point $6 a bowl. It is no longer $6 a bowl, but like you were spending a little bit more, where you were getting like so much more food, and it was exciting to go to these places. And they were doing well, but their earnings are now down. So I feel like that again like demonstrates that like that middle brand is just, there's less people who can justify going the extra step of getting something that's a little bit nicer than a fast food or a Dollar Tree, but not going all the way because that's a whole different subset of consumers.
I feel like these brands are at a moment where they have to decide, like, do they go for the upper crust or do they go for like the lower, like more price conscious consumer? And I feel like Target, like Kelsey mentioned them, I feel like that's a great example of this, where in the last 10 years, Target's really focused on value. And then now with the new CEO coming in, he's told reporters, I think there was a Bloomberg article about it recently, where he was saying like, we're trying to bring back some of the more elevated experiences that set Target apart from a Walmart like 25 years ago. So bringing back like New York Fashion Week events and doing more designer collabs and things like that. And I feel like a lot of brands are going to face a similar question where it's like, do you start leaning into this elevated experience in your marketing, or do you start, focusing on value like McDonald's?
I still feel like that's such a hard position for a brand like Target to be in, because like Target as a whole will never be a luxury brand itself, right? It's a big box store. It's in the suburbs. It's in the cities too, but it's a place that you go where you can get groceries and you can get normal clothes and you can get toys and pet stuff. Like it is like a lifestyle, like normal thing. And if you're leaning into luxury partnerships or making the experience a little bit more elevated, I feel like it's like starting to inch its way towards that upper crust. But how can a brand like Target ever really be upper crust? And I feel like they might be making that choice, but is that the right choice rather than going down to the lower level? Because I feel like it's what they offer at the end of the day is still regular household things. I think it's really hard to make something like that luxury and go all the way to the upper crust, but inching towards the middle, I think, is where we're kind of in danger in this current moment. So I'm curious to see how that plays out for them.
I think something that's so interesting, Katie, is like the idea of the kind of brand partnerships and these collabs that sort of help elevate a brand that might not always, like, it's sort of borrowing the cachet from some other brand with a partnership, but I don't always know if that, if that works. And the reason I kind of bring that up is because I'm thinking, with Target, if you are a consumer who's really price conscious and you're going into Target and you're seeing all this stuff that you're like, price out of that, price out of that, price out of that, like it becomes a more difficult shopping experience.
You don't want to come back.
Right? So you want to go to that value kind of thing. And I think that part of it is kind of knowing, where do I go, the one stop to get the things I need that are really affordable. I think of, but a brand that I think has done this sort of well in an interesting way is Josh Cellars. They sell, it's like an $11 bottle of wine. They have different tiers.
They went viral a little bit ago for like the cheap wine, but like making it look like nice.
And I think that they have done a couple collabs. They did a collab with hotel lobby candles. Mm-hmm. Is that right, Katie? Yep. Yeah. And that was a much more higher priced, discretionary purchase. You buy that because, and wine, of course, is also a discretionary purchase, but if you're buying a candle that's $50, $60, that is fun. That is an indulgence. Mm-hmm. But affordability is still kind of part of that. And I kind of wonder how brands who maybe are affordability is part of their message look for ways to kind of have fun. And maybe the bet is that eventually somebody who loves that brand will come into more money. Although that's a bet. And right now the economic reality is not looking like that is going to happen, but economic shifts happen over long spans of time. So, brand could play the long game here.
I feel like with that specific example, it's an interesting partnership because it's like, in theory, if you are a higher income earner and a higher spender, you might be a fan of Hotel Lobby Candle and you like hear that they're doing a collab with Josh Cellars wine. And maybe like Josh Cellars is so far out of your stratosphere if you're like only spending expensive amounts of money on wine, but you're interested in Hotel Lobby Candle, it gets Josh on your mind, and then you're like, why not? Why would I not spend $11 on a bottle of wine? It's like in your ability to do that. So it kind of does elevate that bottom tier brand to this higher tier brand that higher consumer might be able to consider and like kind of take it under their wing, I feel like.
When we think about how brands are addressing the K-shaped economy, it's like a huge trend that I recently wrote about, which is like how many brands are positioning themselves as lifestyle brands, which I know we talked about with Delta already, but yeah, Josh Cellars is like, we're not just a cheap bottle of wine, we're also an experience. Look at how beautiful our social media page is. Mm-hmm. Look at this elegant candle you can buy from us. And we're seeing this with other brands too. And I think that's how some brands are trying to get those lower tier spenders to spend money. It's like this little treat economy. Mm-hmm. It's like you might not be able to afford a luxury experience. Like Carbone is one brand that I interviewed. And they recognize that the Carbone restaurant clientele is a higher spend clientele, but they can also reach people who buy their $11 jars of pasta sauce at the grocery store who are maybe like willing to spend just a little more to feel like they're indulging themselves than, buying a cheaper brand of pasta sauce. And part of that is like building this experience around it being like, you can't have Carbone in the restaurant, but you can have it at home. Look how, again, our beautiful packaging, look at our beautiful social media page, and creating that like little treat experience for lower spend consumers.
I think something that's going to be really interesting, though, is as brands try to do both, I think that there's always a risk that alienates the higher spend consumer, because part of the luxury experience is the exclusive nature of it. Only I can get this because of my wealth and status and the things that are available to me only. And so for a brand like Carbone that's kind of expanding into this more accessible thing, the question is, how do they do that in a way that doesn't maybe dilute the brand for that really exclusive high spend customer? And I think that's kind of an interesting challenge, because some brands might say, we don't want to dilute that. We're actually just going to shift entirely. We're going to become like it's okay if we're out of reach to people in the bottom of that K, right? And maybe that continues to shift. And I think Delta, as we've talked about before, but they've said that they are expecting a lot of their revenue to come from higher spenders, in the next year. So they're kind of making that calculation, saying we don't want to be budget, and that's not our game. And I think it's kind of interesting. That's a careful line for a lot of brands to have to walk.
I think that line has to be walked in particular by a brand that I know. I think both Katie and I have talked to them for various different stories. Quince, who does kind of their whole shtick is like higher quality items, things like cashmere, things like linen sheets, fancy knives, really anything you can think of, which is an interesting set of products that they have at lower price points. And I think when you kind of are trying to appeal to both, you're in a little bit of danger, because it's like, okay, a $50 cashmere sweater is still too expensive for that lower end of the K. But if the quality is not amazing, it's not that like $500 cashmere sweater, then the upper end of the K is not interested in it either. So it's, what do you do when you're in that middle spot? Like, do you lean into one direction or the other? But when your whole brand is kind of built on like serving this middle element of the economy that might be disappearing, that's a tough position to be in.
I think it relates to like the dupe conversation that we've had before too, where it's like, ultimately consumers aren't dumb. They're going to know that a $50 Quince cashmere sweater is not the same as a $2,000 Loro Piana cashmere sweater. Like, they know that. I mean, Wirecutter did a review of Quince earlier this year where they said they're certainly not reliably creating a low-cost life of luxury. So kind of a burn to the brand. But I think, people, again, like, they just know. They know that they're not getting exactly what the brand may claim that they're getting.
Mm-hmm. That's why I think that the minis, like the little treat economy, is such an interesting thing that we're sort of seeing. Something that we see over and over again with a lot of luxury fashion brands in particular is some of their highest selling products are the socks, the scarf, people want to have a little taste of that luxury, and it's a very aspirational purchase. Maybe you gift somebody a pair of socks from a luxury fashion house because that feels, it's a nod to it, but it's also a way to kind of continue building that aspiration. And so if you're a brand, I know Patron is selling like little mini tequila bottles, and that's one of their most expensive bottles that they're selling in a miniature form. It kind of allows you to continue that relationship with a consumer who's right now priced out. But again, the kind of bet is one day they won't be priced out. One day they'll come buy the full product.
Yeah, or it allows them to like sample something because maybe they are price conscious and they don't want to spend $100 on a bottle of tequila, but they're like, if I like it enough, maybe I can justify it, but I'm going to start off by getting the mini one. And I think the sampling strategy is one that we see with like brands across all categories. Like, there's tequila, but there's also like Tower 28 said that minis are their top selling makeup products, and I think that's definitely a strategy that other brands can apply.
Yeah, perfumes. I hate committing to like a full bottle of perfume if I don't know if I'm really gonna like love the scent forever. So like, also we are overlooking the best part of minis. They're cute. I love having
they're little and
thing.
They're cute, and you can throw them in your bag, and they're not heavy.
It's good for travel. There are a lot of benefits to it for sure. Well, what brands do you guys think have successfully straddled this line and excelled at being a middle brand and appealing to both ends, especially because it seems to be disappearing?
I feel like my first inclination is like in grocery for some reason. Like Costco, I feel like really appeals to like both ends of the spectrum. Mm-hmm. Also Trader Joe's. I feel like there's a lot of like upper and lower tier shoppers there who both get value out of it. It's a cheaper place to get groceries, but it's also a fun aesthetic experience.
I feel like it's like the value message really rings true in both of those places, right? Like if you have a Costco membership, that's an expense. And also if you're buying in bulk, that's an expense. Mm-hmm. But the message for Costco, like the value proposition is, this is a deal. Like eventually, like you're saving money in the long run. And I feel like Trader Joe's is kind of like that too. But of course, they want to have consumers who come in that do have that extra space to buy the seasonal items, those things that are kind of, the higher ticket and higher value items there, because that obviously helps their bottom line. But they do kind of have that central promise of you don't have to everything's affordably priced. Just come get what you need.
I feel like the big joke with Trader Joe's is that it's not a real grocery store. It's where you go to get
snack
yourself
emporium.
snacks. Yeah. Which I feel like relates to kind of that idea where it's like
Everybody loves a snack.
Yeah, everyone loves a snack, and you're not there to really satisfy your everyday living demands, but you're there to kind of treat yourself to a fun little snack, a fun little thing that you can try, and that is
to indulge your sense of whimsy.
Yes, it is a very whimsical grocery store, and that is ultimately kind of aspirational, right? When people are thinking about how they're going to afford their next grocery bill, they're not thinking about what's the seasonal Trader Joe's item that I'm going to get just for funsies, and that adds to that brand for sure.
Yeah, I think of Crocs also as a brand that has kind of moved from one kind of part of I feel like they started and they were kind of like a shoe for being weird. You
My
needed it
middle
for
school
a
class
niche.
loved them.
You needed it for a niche hobby.
Yeah.
They were super grippy, but people talked about how ugly they were, and they really kind of positioned themselves into. They're not inexpensive either, but they're also not,
They're not a luxury
designer.
shoe.
Right, exactly. So there's sort of maybe, and then there's all these little ways you can dress it up. So it's
Gibbets.
extra. Right, exactly. You can add those little gems.
They also do so many collabs. They've done a Balenciaga collab. If you do want luxury Crocs, you can get that.
Yeah.
Right.
I feel like that speaks to that partnership strategy you were talking about, Kelsey, where it's they're kind of a normal brand, but when they partner with Balenciaga, I think they also partner with Justin Bieber. These are obviously flashy names. And if you are that higher tier consumer, you're ooh, I like Balenciaga. Let me see what they're doing with Crocs. Maybe I'll throw on an ugly shoe.
Wouldn't that be funny? And also, I have the money to
throw it around.
Throw it around. Yeah.
Totally. Oh, amazing. Well, thanks for joining us today. And if you have questions, comments, concerns about what the K-shaped economy means for marketers, email us at mkbw@morningbrew.com, which you can also find in the show notes. See you next week.